go ahead and get started.
All right.
Welcome Royal LePage to Learning Services March Sales Success Webinar. And, you know, we're in for another great webinar today. And Chris Leader is on the line. He's going to discuss pricing strategies with us. This webinar is going to discuss not only the strategy to pricing your listings, but also how to get your sellers on board with listing at the right price. We're also going to challenge Chris with some of the listings objections that you submitted. You know, we haven't given him any indication of the questions. We're going to see how Chris responds to them cold. And I thank everybody who submitted their objections to us. You know, in the webinar, I always like to start with just talking about the Sales Success Webinar Series and what our objectives are, and then quickly turn things over to Chris. We're going to end with him dealing with those objections that you've submitted, a quick little summary of some of Learning Services offerings, and an introduction and invitation to next month's webinar. I want to remind you that it is possible to ask questions. Near the top of the top right of the screen, you should see a little, it looks like a little blue or a little white kind of 9 squares. If you click on that, you'll see Q&A, at which point you can see, you can submit a question into us. Although there's 2 questions already almost seeming in there. So let's talk about the Sales Success Series. You know, the objective really when we launched this in January was to enhance the sales development of all our agents across Canada. And we wanted to do this by inviting industry experts like Chris Leader to come in, craft a presentation, and present it to our group, and use the technology that we now have available to us with Google to show these. Now, these are delivered around the 3rd of every month. You can find all the details on royallepage.ca/training if you go to that website, and also see our previously recorded ones from January on business planning and February on lead generation and prospecting. Now, all of this ties to, you know, really Royal LePage's promise to you. And, you know, here at Royal LePage, we're here to help you maximize your earning potential. We do that by providing you with powerful business tools, access to leads and referral, and training for all stages of your career that builds your skills. And, you know, as I've spoken with realtors across Canada through our realtor marketing workshops, I hear people all over saying, hey, you know, oh yeah, I saw the last one, it was fantastic, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, I just want to thank everybody for joining in. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Chris. Now, I will say Chris has been a great partner to Royal LePage. He's trained our sales representatives, our brokers, our network. As you see, he was just coming back from Saskatoon. The last 2 webinars have been crazy. I'm sitting in here taking notes, and I think I'm getting near breaking my hand. He's giving so much information. I want to thank him so much for his time and dedication to this. And I'll turn it right over to Chris. Go ahead.
Thank you very, very much. This topic today is one that for me, it's I actually, in terms of making the presentation, at times it'll come across like I'm a little angry, but it's really about the passion and the intensity about the topic. It's so important. You know, what I typically find, and there's some of the challenges that I see in the marketplace, is that salespeople often don't do the research that's necessary to be able to communicate price properly, or they're not familiar with the neighborhood that they're actually putting a price on. So a lot of this causes challenges and problems, and it creates a confidence issue in their communication skills. So I want to talk to all of these things, and I'm going to give you some strategies. And we only have an hour together today, so it's very difficult for me to take this topic and do it justice in the short period of time that we have. So there will be things that I'm going to bring up that I'm going to recommend that you need to do some homework on your own. You need to investigate, and you need to have a clear understanding so that you're really serving your clients and doing a great job for them. Typical salesperson, when they go in to do an evaluation, or when they go in to list a property for sale, or they're going in to take a look at the opportunity, and they do their typical evaluation, their CMA, and when it gets to that point in the presentation, they have a habit of saying to the seller, well, this is what your house is worth. And the problem with that is, in most cases, of course, the seller thinks their home is worth more, and there is an emotional attachment to the property, and immediately it puts that salesperson sort of at cross purposes with the seller. And now all of the goodwill, assuming that you did a great job on the front end of the appointment, can be quickly damaged significantly in the way you communicate price. It's kind of like, this is what I think your home is worth, and immediately you're in a diametrically opposed position with the seller, and this starts to unravel all of the goodwill that we've developed in the first 30 or 45 minutes of the evening with them. So I want to first say, make sure you do your homework. Make sure you understand the market. Make sure that you understand all about, when I say the market, all about the community that you're pricing. Market knowledge is key. And one of the mistakes, again, I see today is that salespeople have access to technology, and technology gives them lots of information. That information allows them to do a CMA or an evaluation on a property without really even knowing the neighborhood intimately. You know, you can look up the sales, you can look up the expireds, you can look up the properties that are on for sale, and you can kind of get a sense of where you think it should be. And I find that too often salespeople are chasing commission checks instead of building successful businesses and practices. And a lot of that has to do with a successful practice has to do with being a local expert. And there's a lot of things you should know about a neighborhood. Can you, from a formula perspective, put a price on a house? Yes, but do you really have an understanding of the walkability rating on a neighborhood, or your access to shopping and schools and you know, churches and synagogues and mosques, and do you understand the real makeup of the neighborhood and the demographic of the neighborhood? Do you understand who built these houses and how long they've been there, and which builders in the subdivision were better than others and for which reasons? And so these are all of the things that I take exception to when I see a salesperson come in and they do a CMA and they don't even specialize in that neighborhood or that area, and they're vying for the opportunity. And when it gets down to the tough questions, they really don't have the ability to communicate in detail, and they wonder often why the seller chooses somebody else. Well, they choose somebody else because when it gets down to the critical questions, the salesperson who is really part of that neighborhood and part of the fabric of that community can communicate what's going on there in a way that somebody from a distance can't. And I see this all the time, and I see it especially in people who are amateurs, not pros. So you can see that I have a sensitivity to this, and I take exception to people who think that they can hypothetically, and I know that we're talking to people all across the country right now, but hypothetically, if we use the city of Toronto, and you know, they're on the east side of the city, and they think they can go and put a price on a house on the west side or on the northwest. You know, there's different communities, different neighborhoods. There's dividing lines that can affect the price of a property. There's builders who built things, and one builder is better than another, and just not knowing that stuff does such a disservice to the people we represent. So I have a problem with it, and I think that if you're going to price properties, you've got to know the property and the product intimately, and that comes through in your communication skills when you're making your presentations. You're more likely to convince somebody to do the right thing in terms of pricing if you speak with confidence and conviction, and that those feelings that you're communicating come from your insightful knowledge of the marketplace at a very intimate level. So knowing your product really is important. Knowing your market is very important. At the end of the day, one of the key components to this whole exercise is that the seller has to make the home saleable. The seller's got to be the one who's willing to work with you on this. And when it comes to price, it means making sure that the property is in show shape. And we want to get that point across in our presentation because we want the seller committed to maintaining the environment in the property. And in doing so, when an offer comes in, you're going to find, first of all, if the house looks really well and it's been well maintained, you're going to find that it's going to attract more attention. It's going to put you in the front of the pricing category. And then when the offer comes in, the seller is going to be more pliable in terms of taking that offer, because it's the inconvenience of living in a home that has to be ready at a moment's notice to show to the public. You know, another mistake I see with salespeople often is when the seller says, well, you know, can we have 24 hours notice? And in the process, what they don't realize that they're missing out on opportunities on potential buyers that might be on a very short timeline and need to look at something right away. They miss out on those opportunities, ultimately affecting the sale price of the house and the offer offers that they attract, because it's not being displayed to the widest group of people possible. Servicing will not sell an unsaleable listing, and again, this is something that I have a problem with when listing salespeople take properties that are overpriced. And when you overprice a property, you're really hurting the seller in the long run. You know, when people look at a house, when a buyer looks at a house, first of all, and you'll hear me say this a number of times in the next few minutes, but when a property first comes onto the market is when it receives the greatest level of attention. You know, in the first 15 days is when you're going to really have the sort of all that pressure on the property that could potentially bring you multiple offers, and ultimately at the end of the day a bid up situation where we go above market value because of the demand that we put on the property. But setting that aside, if you take an overprice of property, all buyers ask the same three questions: how long has the property been on the market? What's wrong with the house? And boy, I bet you the seller's desperate. Let's try a lowball offer. And the offers they end up attracting end up being thousands less than they would have if they had priced it properly in the first place. Because the salesperson didn't have the communication skills, didn't have the market knowledge, didn't have the product knowledge, didn't have a great presentation, and really hasn't worked at their skill set, they become pliable to the demands of the seller because they live in an environment of scarcity, not abundance. And then what ends up happening is they'll do anything they can to get that listing, and when they do, they'll take the overpriced property, they'll follow the seller's demands in the conversation instead of being able to deal with those in a logical way, and then the property becomes overpriced and it becomes stale. And then what you're going to find is there's another factor that most agents don't take into account, and there's a report out there that probably very few of you have considered. It's called the 30, 60, 90-day report. And if you take a look at the properties that are on a market that sell in the first 14 days, they sell at the highest possible price. When they hit the 30-day mark, the list to sell ratio spreads on the sale properties significantly, and you can see that they listed it at one price and it sells for significantly less. After you hit the 60-day mark, that spread becomes much larger, and after you hit the 90-day mark and so on, it gets much larger. So in terms of creating data that a seller can understand, developing a 30, 60, 90-day report and zeroing in on the first 14 days of the sale properties on the marketplace is going to indicate where they need to be to get the highest possible price. And again, if you're not doing this sort of stuff, this is the sort of thing you need to be doing for the commission dollars we're getting paid. If you want full fees, then you got to bring a full service package to the table. And if you can't do what I'm talking about, you should learn how to do it, because you're not doing your sellers justice by not being able to communicate in a way that helps them make the right choices and decisions. Now, forgive me if I sound a little intense, and but you need to know I'm very passionate about this topic, and I take exception to people who are opportunists, not professionalists. And I believe in people who take very good care of our business, who constantly work hard at trying to be better at what they do, and not just somebody who wants to take advantage of an opportunity when it presents itself. So that being said, servicing won't sell an unsaleable listing. Overpriced properties become stale. They get shopped through the market, and eventually, as I said to you earlier, buyers, the offers they end up inviting end up being thousands less. And the strategy that the seller has used and convinced the salesperson to adopt has actually been counterproductive to their end goal. Now, learning to say the tough stuff nicely is really the challenge when we get to price. And most of the time, the seller thinks their home is worth more. But I need you to be honest with people. So when you get to the sensitive topics, what I need you to do is I need you to become submissive in your tonality in your conversation, so that it doesn't feel interrogational and it doesn't feel like a debate. At the end of the day, it's not about you pushing your point through so that the seller comes around to the way you're thinking, but more importantly, you persuading the seller to join you in your thought process. And this is a salesperson's skill set that's required. Telling somebody what their house is worth and then getting into a pushing match with them, a verbal shoving match, is not a professional. A real professional says, let's take a few minutes and take a look at the data. You know, we've been able to find similar properties like yours, so we didn't have to guess at them, at the price. Now, we have three categories we have to take a look at. We have the ones that have sold, and they will be one of the margins that we take a close look at, and we will look for the most recent sale with the least amount of adjustments that is most comparable to your property in close proximity, so that you can see where one margin is. Then we're going to go out to the far side, and we're going to look for properties that look the same as yours, in the same neighborhood, have a lot of the same attributes, but unfortunately they didn't sell their house because they chose the wrong price, which was our price that was too high, and they became what we refer to in the industry as expired. Then we need to take a look at the category in the middle, and that's the properties that when a buyer goes out to look at, they will be comparing other homes in the marketplace to yours, and they will be looking for the properties that offer the best value in the area and are most comparable. So we're going to take a look at all three of those categories, and in the process I'm going to ask you questions, and I believe quite clearly that you're going to have enough data, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, to choose the right price. And here comes the operative word that you want to use: position the property properly in the marketplace to get you the highest possible price, but at the same time make sure we get the attention that's necessary so that we can get the offer that you're looking for. So that's how to say the tough stuff. Now I'll take you through a little bit more of this in detail. There's nothing wrong, by the way, with any property that the right price and terms won't cure. So if you can get the house priced properly, no matter what kind of shape it's in, and you can bring the seller around to putting a realistic price on it, I promise you, you can sell it. Doesn't matter how tough it is. I don't even care if the house has got wheels on it. At the end of the day, if it's priced properly, or you have terms, and that's a whole other topic, terms, but if you have terms, you're going to get the job done. Now, motivation determines price. One of the challenges you're going to run up against is you're going to meet sellers who are not serious about selling their house. They're fishing, and this happens frequently in a spring market particularly. You know, if we get our price, we'll sell. If we don't, we won't. It really doesn't matter if we move this year or we move next. If a salesperson was to take their valuable time, their 5.5 work days a week, and take a percentage of that time and put it into a property that's not going to sell, it's very costly. People say to me all the time, well, it doesn't cost anything to have a listing. And I say it does. It costs the most valuable asset you own, your time. When you think about it, you only have so many days a week. And if you put that property on the market, there's still going to be activities that are required. You know, broker loading it, there's going to be photography. I mean, and then you say, well, I'm not even going to do any of that. Well, if you don't do the fundamentals, then it reflects poorly against you in the future. You know, if you don't hire a professional photographer to shoot the property, then the next time you go in on a listing appointment against the competition, they're going to show what they do, and they're going to show what you've done in the past. And in the process, you're going to set yourself up so that you're going to be very vulnerable to missing out on the really good opportunities. So it's important, and you have certain costs that are associated with running a full service program. You got websites, you got digital marketing, you got print media marketing, you got photography, you got videography, you're probably bringing in a stager for a decluttering exercise. You put all of that together and it costs money. So, you know, and I've seen, and some of the agents are going to take exception with this, but they're going to say to me, you know what, Chris, I'll take any listing because I'll take the sign calls and I will redirect them to a more realistic property. So really what you're doing is you're using a selling tactic called bait and switch. You're baiting the caller using a property and then you're switching them to something else. I can't imagine the seller would take, if you actually said to the seller, okay, I'll take your listing, but just so you know, I'm going to be using it as a bait and switch strategy so I can take really good prospects that call in on your house and I'm going to show them other properties so I can make a living. We're just using yours as sort of a lost leader to attract attention in the marketplace. So, you know, if you were to spell it out realistically to the seller, they would take exception to that and they'd say, well, no, I don't want my property used like that. I was hoping you'd put it on the market and if people were interested, you would show it. And if you were being really honest with them, you'd say, well, I understand that, but I can't take your listing at that price. If I did, it would be as if I wasn't telling you the truth. The property's not going to sell, and I'm not here tonight to put up a for sale sign. I'm here to put up a sold sign. And if I can't sell your house, I think at the very least what you need from a salesperson is honesty. My integrity is always at question with people when I come to meet them, and that's the one thing I have is a solid reputation. So at the end of the day, what if we can't agree on price? I want us to part company as friends, and at least you can say the guy was honest. He had he had things in place that he wasn't prepared to deviate from, and he held true to what his beliefs were. I have to give him. So the other thing I want to tell you about pricing, communication skills, and confidence. Confidence will be found in your ability to fill your funnel with opportunities. I can't stress to you enough how important it is that you prospect for new business, that you're constantly looking for opportunities. You keep your calendar booked each week, so when you do go in and you meet somebody who you are at cross purposes with price, with confidence and not arrogance, you can communicate. And you don't need the opportunity, though you'd like to have it, because if you need something, the seller will smell it on you. They smell that desperation, and they know that you're pliable to making the wrong decisions, which ultimately will lead you to being in a position where the property doesn't sell. So motivation determines price. And the more motivated somebody is, the more they're going to be flexible on the offers that come in and asking the right price. Now, at the end of the marketing portion of your digital presentation, so let me say to you this, that one of the things they asked me to handle today was talk a little bit about commissions. But before we get to talking about the specifics of that, I want you to know that a really good digital listing presentation will reduce the amount of questions you get around commissions or objections, period. If you really look like you know what you're doing, your presentation is well organized and structured, your marketing campaigns are strong, all of the activities that are necessary to generate the results exceed the seller's expectation at every turn, then you're probably going to have a lot less pushback at the end of the evening. I'm going to say that the natural conclusion of a great presentation, and I want to put the word in there, digital, because today we shouldn't be using analog or paper presentations. We should be using digital presentations. And if you're not, then I'm going to be questioning you as a homeowner on your ability to use technology, and this may cause some other commission challenges later on. I'd be looking at you and thinking, what am I paying for? I mean, they're using technology, or they're using a program that we might have looked at 20 years ago. Today, you really got to be bringing a digital presentation. It's got to be slick and sexy. It's got to have lots of great content in it, and your PowerPoint needs to pop off the computer. Probably some video built in. I would also recommend some video testimonials. You want to show them in terms of what you're doing with your videography to promote their properties and the quality of the photography work you're doing. But all of that said and done, when you get to the end of the marketing portion and it's time to talk price, the question you want to ask them is, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, before we talk about price today, if we could agree on the price, would you be prepared to list with me? And if they say no, I need you to back up and go into the marketing section and find out more of what they had expected or what they were looking for from an agent to make sure you've dotted the I's and crossed the T's. I mean, at this point, you're on a qualified appointment. The seller wants to sell. You have an idea because you asked in advance what you thought their home was worth, and they give you some idea what they were thinking. You came in, you've done a great presentation. You haven't talked price yet, and you're about to go to the pricing portion of your presentation. But at this point, I would say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if we could agree on price, would you be prepared to list with me tonight? And if they say no, back up and find out why. Don't go to price. But if they say yes, then this is going to take us into our pricing strategies. Now, one of the dialogues that I would like you to use is something called the dilemma technique. I would say, well, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I have some good news for you. Remember when we spoke on the telephone and you told me all about your house, and I was able to do a bunch of research before I got here? The good news was I was able to find homes just like yours that have sold recently, so I didn't have to guess at the price. However, the bad news was, and I have some for you, you gave me an idea what you were hoping to get for your house, and I'll be honest with you, I researched this thing 6 ways to Sunday. I went back over a year, and I couldn't come close to the price you were hoping for. But herein lies my real dilemma. I just asked you if we could agree on price, would you give me the listing? And you said you would, and I'm sitting here thinking to myself, do I tell you what you want to hear only to let you down later? Or do I risk telling you the truth and losing the listing to an agent that isn't as ethical as me? So I'm going to leave the decision up to you. You want me to lie or level with you? This is called the liar level technique, and I would use this technique if the spread was small, because when I get to price, they're like, oh my goodness, the way you were talking, I thought it was large. Or if the spread was large, this will soften them to come around to where you need them to be to help make the right choices and decisions. So again, this is script training. It's part of your presentation. It's the segue between marketing and into price, and it softens the seller up before you get to talking to them about your pricing strategies. Now, the 3 strategies that I think are an absolute must. And if you can't do these 3 and do them well, then you have a serious listing problem on your hands. And I can't recommend strongly that you get your real estate books out and you start studying how to do this stuff, because you're talking about the largest asset in somebody's lifetime. They're counting on you to get this right. They're counting on you to have done your homework properly, so the choices and decisions they're about to make about the largest asset they own is resting on the data that you brought to that table tonight. You better have done a good job. So the first thing you should be able to do is you should be able to do a proper CMA. And I'm not talking about a kind of a little bit of a rule of thumb. I need you to be able to take a look at properties that have sold, ones that are for sale right now, and the ones that didn't sell. And you need to understand intimately at a local level all of the factors that affect those properties, and you need to be able to bring the seller in to that exercise so that they can see, and here's the operative word, they can see the right place to position their house in the marketplace to get the attention that's necessary to get it sold. Should that not work and not get you to where you need to be, the next strategy I would bring them to discuss is something called the right price analysis. And this is how time affects the value of real estate. I will take you through this exercise quickly in a minute or two, but again, you need to, I'd recommend you get a hold of some of our material at Leader's Edge and find out how to articulate this particular strategy so that the seller comes around to giving you the price that you need to get the job done. Now, if these 2 strategies don't work, the third one that you need to know about, and again, you can get it from any of our material at Leader's Edge, or you could look at, all you would have to do is take a look at, even Google this, and you can find formulas, a formula for you to be able to use, but you need to be able to do an absorption rate analysis. And if you can't do an absorption rate analysis, then again, I think that these are the fundamental pricing strategies. So you got to be able to do a CMA. You should be able to explain how time affects real estate so that they can make the right choices, and you got to be able to show how the law of supply and demand affects the value of real estate today and tomorrow based on inventory levels. And if you don't know how to do these things, then again, I'm going to say to you, you don't know how to do your job completely, and you are putting your sellers in a precarious position by not being able to articulate all of the information that's necessary for them to be able to make the right choices. Hear what I'm saying there, for them to be able to make the right choices. So we're going to need to lead them in the right direction, and I need you to be an expert at what you do. You have an awful lot at stake right now, and they do as well. We can't afford not to get it right. Highest price analysis, when we're talking about CMAs, I need you to take a look at the ones that have sold, and you need to be able to do, before I get into that, you need to be able to do a really good evaluation. If you've never seen our digital listing presentation, there's a CMA built right into it that you can upload photos and all of the details of the comparable properties, and it's a fantastic presentation. You can find it on our website if you're interested. So when it comes to comparables, we're looking for listings and sales. The factors that you need to consider were the most recent listings within the last 6 months. So time and the time adjustment is one of the key factors. Try to stay within a half-mile radius of the subject property that you're putting a price on. Make sure you watch for dividing lines in neighborhoods. You know, at one corner to the next, or a neighborhood can change over. Prices can go up or down significantly. You've got to know the neighborhood to be able to make the right calls when it comes to bringing those comps in. And try as much as possible to stay within 10% square footage. This would be for our listings and sales. These are sort of good, solid strategies when you're looking at your comps. When it comes to solds, take a look at the average days on the market and make sure you track that property right back to when it was first introduced, because often they go through a series of price reductions, and sometimes agents like to play games. Depending on what board you're in, they will withdraw a listing when an offer comes in. They'll put the offer and the listing back in, and it will make it appear that they sold the property at 110% of value in 24 minutes. And we all know that that is just a false way of manipulating the numbers for their future marketing materials. But what you need to do as a professional is track it back to the beginning, show when it came on the market, show the series of price reductions, show the list to sell ratios, run your 30, 60, 90-day report so that the seller can see what type of sequence of events took place so that they can make the right choices. Make sure you understand the beginning ratios to when the property sold, and adjust for differences, lot sizes, amenities, time. All of these factors need to be taken into this to make sure that the seller understands clearly. Now, never tell people things, always ask them questions, and your questions will lead them to the conclusion you want them to come to. If they come to the wrong conclusion, circle back with the questions and bring them back around so that they find the right spot. Expireds are another important component. They're the ones on the market that didn't sell, and they're always priced incorrectly. Look for similar homes like theirs that didn't sell. You'll find that often one of the main factors, and this answers your again something to do with your commission challenges, is that you're going to find a disproportionate amount of properties that have gone through significant list to sell ratio numbers when it's a discount broker. Remember, discount or limited service brokers will take a listing at any price, and when the offer finally comes in, they take it. It's often way off the mark. You'll also find there's a disproportionate amount of discount cutting agents in the expired column because they really are just opportunists. They're not professionals. And let the seller know what strategies that you do differently than the people who don't. This is building back value into the commission rates that we charge. Active listings, now this is an important piece. So what we want to do is take the seller into the properties that are for sale. Explain to the seller when they're out looking for a house, they're going to be looking at which properties in which neighborhood that they were most interested in are presently available, and how much the sellers are asking. And they will look for the best value they can get for the money they're spending based on what's available, as will people when it comes to theirs. So instead of telling them where their house is, ask them where do they feel now that the data is in front of them they would put their house. Keep in mind, if we put it and we overprice it, it will get activity, but the activity will be used to demonstrate where there's better value in the marketplace. So the seller should be able to understand your data and be able to slide the house right where it needs to be so that it offers the most and still has a very attractive price. And that would be the strategy for getting them to put it in the market at the right property. Remember, don't tell them, ask them, where do they, looking at the data, where do they feel their home needs to be positioned, is the word you're looking for, to draw the right attention but still ensure that they get the highest possible price. And if they overprice it, bring to their attention that other agents will show their house, but they will use it as a way of demonstrating better value in other properties that they're competing, that the seller will be competing against. So that would be how I would handle that. Now, if that still doesn't work, then we may want to take a look at how time affects the value of real estate. And what you may say to them is, you say, a home has a different price depending on your level of motivation. If you need out of something right away, there's people out there that'll write you a check for it at a significantly discounted price so that they can turn around and, as they say on television, flip it for a profit, and they're in the business of speculating. On the other hand, we have John and Jane Doe, and they're quite willing to pay market value for the house that they want to live in. This would be under normal negotiating terms with a normal closing date, and they're excited about raising their family. But market value or even the speculator's price are not the most important prices. The most important price is the seller's list price, and the seller's list price really depends on how quickly they want it sold. If you take a look at this graph, what this tells us is that for this particular example, to get market value of $350,000, it takes about 90 days to get an offer, probably another 60 to close. We're looking at 150 days to put a check in the seller's hands. The question isn't how much is their house worth, but how quickly do they want the job done. If they want to accomplish it sooner, they need to come south of market value. The further south they come, the more aggressive position they adopt, the more attractive their property becomes. Soon they're attracting offers, and they're in the driver's seat when it comes to the negotiations around the details of that agreement of purchase and sale. So how do we put the seller in charge? Aggressive price. The further north of the market value we go, then the more negotiations have to take place, and you may have to entertain things like a sale of purchaser's property offer, conditional on finance, home inspections, all of that sort of thing. So it's really not about how much, because that's dependent on your time. The question is when, and the question is how quickly do you want to move. So I would definitely take them through this exercise if I didn't get them at the price I wanted to. Now, the third way of looking at this is explaining the law of supply and demand. So in some marketplaces, we have too much real estate and not enough buyers. In a case like that, being able to demonstrate to the seller what how the law of supply and demand is affecting the market conditions, you're going to find in a market that has too much inventory, the seller is going to have to accept lower prices than maybe what they were hoping for. Once you start to look at the number of homes that are for sale, the seller is going to have to bring terms to the opportunity, and that may include things like leaving chattels that they wanted to maybe take, and they have to be prepared to be on the market longer. And we have all kinds of markets across the country that would be experiencing this. This is the sort of market that Calgary might see if the oil industry continues to stay soft. Inventory levels rise, house prices start to drop, and sellers need to be more negotiable when it comes to the limited amount of buyers that might be looking in the Calgary market at this moment. However, if you go to certain areas in Toronto, we don't have enough inventory and too many buyers. So in a case where we don't have enough inventory, the sellers are in control. We're going to see prices rise. They're not going to have to leave the appliances, and they can dictate the closing date. So you as an area expert can zero in on this stuff and start to bring, and when I talk about Calgary and I talk about Toronto, those are two big markets that you really can't put a price on just by making an arbitrary statement like that. It really comes down to the specifics of each neighborhood. There are certain condominium buildings in Toronto, for instance, that aren't selling very quickly, and you need to understand that. And there are certain condominium buildings in Toronto that are selling very quickly, and you need to understand that. That's where the local expertise plays part of this equation. And I'm certain there is still prices in neighborhoods in Calgary that are selling quickly and ones that aren't. But the point is, you can't do it and give somebody a really accurate price unless you know the market really intimately. But you get a sense of what I'm talking about here in terms of how inventory. So then what you want to do is you want to take somebody into an absorption rate. Now, I talked to you about your 60-90 30, 60, 90 day report. This is sort of what I'm talking about. When a property first is introduced to the marketplace is when it receives the greatest level of attention. As it stays on the market, the property price and the amount of interest starts to slip away. Buyers stop looking at the property and it becomes stale, dated, or shopped, market shopped. So getting it right off the bat has going to make the most sense, and it's going to create bring the highest possible price. You need to be able to get it priced aggressively so that it's attractive. When a property first comes on the market is when it receives the greatest level of attention, typically within the first 14 days. Sells at the best price during the first 14 to 30 days. That's when you're going to see the least amount of spread between the list-to-sell ratio, or the list-to-sell numbers in terms of your ratios. Overpriced homes become stale dated. Remember, all buyers ask the same three questions. How long has it been on the market? What's wrong with it? And you think they're desperate. And then the offers they get end up being a lot less. If you underprice it and you don't properly expose it, then you're going to leave money on the table that should have belonged to the seller. And a good example of that is if a market gets really tight, we start to hear the term pocket listings. And when you hear the term pocket listings, you're doing the seller a disservice. When a property isn't exposed to everybody and the proper marketing hasn't been done, then you may have missed a buyer out there that might have been willing to pay even more. So don't do your seller a disservice and fall into that trap. If you have a buyer, bring them over, because if you do, you're putting your potential seller in a very precarious position. It's about making sure we get the widest amount of attention, that your property is listed not just on Realtor or MLS.ca, but it's on all of the other sites, including Royal LePage, and properly syndicated through whatever sites you're connected with. Making sure you've held an open house, you've done just listeds, done print media, even used some of the local homes and land magazines, all of that stuff. Because at the end of the day, if the public doesn't know it's there, then you're not going to attract the prices, multiples, and a bid up situation, and you've done your seller a disservice. The right price will sell in the right period of time, and the seller will be happy with the price that you got them. Now, incentives are also an important item, and there are a whole list of them that you could include. As the market slows down, you have to bring more incentives. The seller needs to bring more incentives to the relationship or to the file, and as the market heats up, they're going to need to bring less. For instance, in a hot market, the seller may not need to be negotiable on closing. In a slow market, the seller would have to be. I would recommend that in a slow market you look at things like including landscaping, maid service for a year, pool maintenance. You may even want to consider in some marketplaces, not Toronto, that you may in a slow market consider paying the buyer's land transfer tax or closing costs. Toronto's got a double land transfer tax, so that almost makes it virtually impossible. But it depends on what your market's doing. You come up with ways to make your property more attractive, and there's lots of things that we would teach you in the Leader's Edge program to help you set your properties apart from everybody else's. Protecting your commission. Now, one of the things that they asked me to talk about today, just briefly, was commissions, because in many markets, agents are struggling with commissions. Well, I would first say to you that you're going to need to be an area expert. As your expertise goes up, so does your value. If you're traveling too far afield, there's nothing special about you. I can get average everywhere. What I'm looking for is exceptional, and when you're exceptional, I'll pay for it, no matter what industry I'm talking about. If you're average, you know what? I can get an average real estate agent everywhere. In fact, in the city of Toronto, there's 38,000 of them. Unless you're something special, then I can't see why I would be paying full fee. So you got to be special. And what does that mean? Well, you first of all got to specialize in a neighborhood, a niche market, a demographic, an age group, a price range. It's got to be something that is your sort of claim to fame, something that you can claim your excellence, attach your excellence to. Then you need to develop marketing campaigns that build on the reputation and the integrity and to the specifics of the marketplace you're working on. Then we need to build a strong digital position in the marketplace, and this includes a great website at a community level, specializing in social media at a community level, having digital campaigns to attract people to your website and your web presence, and then always the traditional stuff like getting out and talking to people in the neighborhood and finding out about who's thinking about buying or selling. All of this will come across in your communication skills when you go in on a property that's in your zone. It's in your sweet spot. It's what you do. And when you sit down, people cannot dispute the fact that you're excellent at what you've done. Build a great listing presentation when you get to the table, like I told you, in terms of a digital presentation. If you're looking for one, go to our website. But I was going to say that a great digital presentation will set you apart from all of the other people who bring in their dog-eared CMA and an ad they ran in a magazine or a newspaper last month as their entire strategy. There are agents out there you're competing with. They think that the main strategy that they need is to put their client's house on the MLS system. Well, if that's the only thing you're doing, then I'll be honest with you, I would definitely have a hard time paying you a full fee for that. So you got to bring a whole lot more to the table, and in the process, you need to stand apart from the amateurs in the industry. You're still going to get people who are going to ask you about commissions, and you are not going to get every opportunity you go in on. There are some people, no matter what you tell them, what you show them, and what you give them, they're still going to default to the cheapest person in the world. There are people out there that will step over $1 to save a dime, and the best thing you can do with them is give them to somebody else, get them, because I can promise you, if they go to you because you're the cheapest, they're not going to you because they're the best, and they're certainly not telling the rest of the community that you have to see this person because they're so good at what they do. And when they go to sell again, they're not coming back to you because of the quality of your work. If they even inquire, which I doubt that they will, but if they did, it would be to see if you're still as cheap as you always were. And at the end of the day, I can tell you for a fact, and I've done this a very, very long time, that you cannot run a successful business off a discounted model. And that's a whole other workshop that we could spend hours going through so that I could demonstrate to you why that's not possible. But from where you stand, it's about building a quality experience. It's about prospecting plenty so that you get to pick and choose who you're going to work with. You're not going over to hope that you can get this listing. You're going over to see if you even want it. I don't want you to adopt a position of arrogance, but I do need you to be confident. And confidence is found in product and in market knowledge. You need to be able to say to somebody, they're going to say to you things like, the other agent said they'll do it for less. And I would say, well, if that agent is that weak at protecting their own paycheck, how strong will they be at negotiating the sale price of your house? I'd say to you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we keep talking about how much money I'm going to make, and I'll be honest with you, you're asking the wrong question. I say this with a complete respect, but at the end of the day, it's not how much I get paid that's important here, it's how much you leave with. What I get paid is irrelevant. How much money you get after the sale and all of the costs associated with it, that's the number that's most important. So let's take a few minutes, because often you'll find that there are people out there that'll say, I'll do it for 4%, and you think you're saving 1%. But what you don't realize is you sold your house for 5% less than you should have, and at the end of the day, you're 4% behind just because you were able to save 1% on your commission. Commission dollars are not the question you should be asking. It's how much money will you net me out of the sale. So let's take a look at net. Let's take a look at everything I'm doing. Let's take a look at all the services I bring to this opportunity, and then let's make a calculated and educated decision on all of the right information. So it's not about how much you charge, it's about how much they're going to get by working with you. And the quality of your work, the attention to detail, the discipline that you bring to it, the effort, the reputation, the integrity. You know, the question you have to ask yourself is, if a person was willing to give it up that quickly, where's their integrity, and what happens when an offer comes in? Will they sell you short for a fast buck so they can throw another commission check in their account, or will they hang in there with you and walk you through the details to make sure you maximize the opportunity and leave with as much money as possible? So let's stop talking commission, let's start talking net, because at the end of the day, the most important person sitting at this kitchen table tonight is you, not me. And let's make sure I make you happy. Wouldn't you agree? So there's some commission dialogues for you. That'll give you a little bit, and again, you really need to, if you haven't done it, you need to do the Leaders Program. There's a ton of stuff in this program that'll help you with that. Seller's net sheets are something we break only in the case of emergency, and if you still can't get the seller's head around to the price you want them to be, say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, let's take a minute and take a look at what this sale price would actually net us, and be prepared to use it only when necessary. Never share it with a buyer's agent. Always keep it under wraps, and only go there when the seller won't give you the price you want. Instead of doing an apples-to-apples comparison, drop it down to the baseline to show them what they're going to net. Do you have any questions for me, gang?
All right, well, Chris, thanks so much. I mean, just so much information. We have one coming in from Sheila, and she's just asking, you know, early on in the presentation, you mentioned, you know which builders are better than other builders. And so she's really asking, like, how can she know which builder is better at the end of the day?
Well, I would say to Sheila that she should understand a little bit about construction. I don't know which province she's in, but a lot of the real estate boards actually used to have, and I don't know if they still do, but a course on construction. So understanding construction is one thing, and then understanding and don't dismiss the experienced agents in your office. They understand what's happened and who built what 10, 15, 20 years ago. Many of them can tell you about the builders in a community, and they can share with with you. This one was built by Jack Stoller. This one was built by the Stevens brothers. This one was built by, ABC Building Company. Stoller always built a basic home, but it was rock solid. You'll never have any engineering issues with him. These guys over here were flashy. You should know things about builders in terms of when they were built. If they, if you're what neighborhoods you're working in. If they were built in the 40s, you're going to have asbestos issues or lead paint issues. If they were built in the 70s, you're going to have aluminum wiring issues. These are the sort of things that you should know, and you should do your research. And if you don't know these things, then you should go back and find out who built the homes, how long they've been built, what challenges have people had with them. The other thing I'll tell you about most of the challenges around construction, they're all fixable. Everything that goes on in a house is just a mechanical issue that can be fixed. When I say mechanical or structural, they can be fixed. So, if you're in a really old 1920s house and the home is sloped and that you can see that it's got some settling issues, all of that can be jack post fixed. So again, understanding construction a little bit will go a long way, and knowing a little bit about the people who built in the community that you service will help separate you out from the average. More questions?
All right, well, I'm just having a look. I don't see anything really on the YouTube comments. I don't see anything coming in on the Q&A app. So, and I think people have had their time to put that in there. So I'm going to switch gears here. And, you talked a lot about script training. You talked about dialogues. And so we, in anticipation of this webinar, went out and asked our audience and said, hey, give us some of your toughest listing objections. And so we selected 4 of them. And what we're going to ask Chris to do is essentially imagine you're sitting at the table, you're across from this seller who's asking this question, and what exactly would you say? I will say Chris has had no advanced warning of these. I'm presenting them here now for the first time. So let's get right down to it. So the first one that came in, we don't want to sell before we find somewhere else to live that we like, as we wouldn't want to be stuck or stressed into buying just anything.
Okay, so the technique I would use for this is lose from both ends. And now the first thing is I need to frame this, and I got to assume that the person, I don't know where Royal LePage Village is, but
it's in Hudson, Quebec, just outside of Montreal, actually.
Okay, so let's just say for communication's sake, the people are would be selling a $300,000 home and buying a $400,000 home. Now, this technique will only work if they're not buying some sort of real specialty property. I mean, if you've got a buyer who says, look, I'm going to move when I find my 50-acre horse ranch with rolling hills, BC cedar home with an indoor riding arena and a horse jacuzzi, you're going to be looking for a long time. And that's not where this works. So this works if you're selling 3, moving to 4. They're selling a 3-bedroom, they're moving up to a 4-bedroom. They've got a single-car garage now. They want a 2-car garage in the next property. Maybe they got 1.5 baths in the house they're in. Mom and dad want their own ensuite now. So we're talking about a step up, but not, nothing out of the ordinary. And I'd say to the Mr. and Mrs. Seller, not that you're doing it wrong, but going about it in reverse. Ultimately, if we head out to look at houses that you might like, let's pretend for a second this weekend we go out and we find something you like, you're going to want to make an offer. Now herein lies the problem. You've got what's referred to in the industry as frozen equity. We see something at 400, give me an idea, what would you like to offer them for it? And they'll say something like, well, 380. And I'd say, okay, but herein lies the problem. You want me to take $20,000, negotiate $20,000 to your advantage, but we're going to need to get the seller to accept an offer that is sale of purchaser's property, probably a financing condition, and a home inspection. The likelihood that I could get them to accept all of those conditions and take $20,000 off the asking price is slim to nil. So you love the house, you really want it, we're going to put the offer in. The offer is going to get signed back, and you're going to probably, most likely, have to pay full price, $20,000 more. But that's not the worst part. Let me tell you the next piece. What you're going to end up doing then is turn yourself from a want-to seller to a have-to seller. You're going to put your property on the market, and you're going to jump at the first available opportunity that comes your way. You're going to sell your house for thousands less than you should. On 300, let's say we sold it for 280 because you really wanted the other one. Now, because not that you did it wrong, but went about it in reverse, what you've done is you've cost yourself an extra $40,000. Now, if there was a way I could show you how to save the 40, make sure you get top dollar for your house, and you were able to negotiate the best possible deal on the one you wanted, would you like to know how? And they say yes. I say to them, well, what I'm going to do is we're going to put your home on the market now. On your $300,000 home, we're going to hold out for the best possible price. So at the end of the day, we're not going to need to jump at an offer, but we're going to be able to negotiate what's best for you so that you can come with the most amount of equity to the purchase. But in your listing, we're going to, you see here, normally it says the date for possession. It's normally people in real estate put in here to be arranged or negotiable. What I'm going to say is instead of the negotiable or to be arranged, we're going to ask for a little longer closing than normal. Let's say in this case, maybe June 15th. And on top of that, I'm going to put right here in the listing, the seller reserves the right to rent the property back for a further 60 days after closing at their discretion. So now, even if we sold the house tomorrow, you wouldn't move until September 15th. That'll give us all the time, or at least the security, starting today, to be able to know that you have enough time to be able to buy what it is you're looking for. We can get an offer on your property, which will be our first step, and it's going to strengthen our negotiating position when we go out to purchase, because we're going to get you pre-approved. We'll know exactly what your equity situation is. We will have ample time to organize the financing. We'll supply the seller on the house that you're buying with all of the details around your financial position so that they can feel confident, and in the process, we're going to get the house you want for less, and we're going to get the house you want to sell for even more. So that's what I would do with that.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'm in. Sign me up.
Good.
So the next one comes from Beth and Kevin. Beth from Royal LePage Binder out in Windsor, and Kevin from Royal LePage Inter-Quebec in Quebec City. And I mean, the common one. We're thinking that we're going to list it privately for a while first. Besides, we're not really in a hurry.
Well, right there lies the problem. We're not in a hurry, and that speaks to the motivation that I talked about earlier today. Often salespeople will get tangled up with somebody that's in no hurry, and I would say, and I'd say that's good, and you should take the time that you feel is necessary. But at the end of the day, you want to, as a seller, make sure your property is exposed to the widest range of people. It sits on the market for the right period of time, so it doesn't become stale or market shopped. So taking that part of it, and I don't want to use the word hurry, but there is a time factor involved in making sure that you put your property on the market and it's sold properly. If not, it stays on the market and it becomes stale. But setting that aside, when it comes to selling a house privately, there's some things you should be concerned about. First of all, and I don't want to hurt your feelings or offend you, but I want to be honest and forthright with you, putting your home on the market and selling it yourself is a crazy idea. It's actually dangerous. It's dangerous for a number of reasons. First thing is, you're inviting people into your property that you've had no way of pre-qualifying. Crazy people don't look crazy, and I would be personally very concerned about opening my doors to the public and say, hey, come on in, have a look at my stuff, see if there's anything here you might like while I'm not here. That's not a good idea. And to put it into context for you, I sold a Harley this year. Instead of selling my Harley on Craigslist or Kijiji, I took it for that very reason down to the Harley shop and wholesaled it. I did not want people at my house, and I don't want people looking at my stuff. It is not a good idea, number one. Number two, even if somebody brought you an offer, how would you qualify them? How would you know that they were a legitimate offer? Because they brought you an offer? I mean, there are people in real estate who have been tricked by people. We today would have people pre-qualified by your mortgage expert. I would say to the Mr. Fisbo, are you going to ask people for a copy of their T4 slip for the last few years? Can you supply me with a letter of employment from your employer? Will you give me photocopies of your bank statements so we can be assured that your money's not coming from a borrowed source and that your financing is fundable? And oh, by the way, I need you to fill in this information. I need to do a credit check on you before we can entertain entering into an agreement of purchase and sale. You can't do that. I know I'm being facetious, but these are the things you should be concerned about. The next question I have to ask you, if somebody comes to buy your house privately, The question you need to really think through thoroughly is if they could go to a real estate agent in a real estate agent's office, use the MLS computer, the real estate agent would drive them around to look at houses, probably buy them a Tim Hortons coffee or at Starbucks, depending on what price range they're buying in, buy them lunch, draft the agreement, get them financing, get them a moving company, look after everything, hold the transaction together, distribute the paperwork, look after the amendments, extensions, and waivers, and would do all of that at no cost under a traditional model. What is the only reason a buyer would look at a for sale by owner? Because they're trying to save money, and you're trying to save money. At the end of the day, everybody pays a commission. You can pay it to the buyer and you can do all the work, or you can pay it to me and I'll do the work. But at the end of the day, everybody pays a real estate commission. So I could go on a rant even longer on that, but I think that's probably given them enough.
Thanks, Chris. All right, next.
All right.
And this one comes from Danilo, Royal LePage Signature Realty in Toronto. I spoke with him actually earlier. He's a newer agent. He comes from working at big telcos, so he knows a lot about exceeding expectations. But he said sometimes, and he hasn't had this yet, but he said he gets a feeling this is going to come. I'm going to list with another agent because they have more experience.
Well, I'm glad that he has the crystal ball and he's able to predict the future. There's a few other things I'd like to ask him if he is so good at those predictions, and that would be, could you pick my lottery numbers for me? I'm teasing. No. Now, first of all, I want to say this to him. He's lacking some of his confidence, and what I need him to do is I need him to be an expert in his field. I need him to be able to do all of the things that we talked about earlier, so when he goes into a presentation, he's fantastic. I need him to always be on time, organized, prepared, look sharp, so that he brings a real a degree of confidence to the communication. When people ask him, how long have you been in real estate? If they were to ask me that, I'd say I'm relatively new. This is my first year in the business. And they would say to me, well, I'm a little concerned. I really want to go with an agent that I think has the experience to help with such a difficult transaction. And I'd say, well, let me ask you this. What if you could have both? The experience, a really experienced agent to make you bring the confidence to the conversation that's necessary and make you feel comfortable, but at the same time the enthusiasm and the energy of somebody who's excited about the career that's out front of them. Why if you could have both of those, would that be the solution to the issue at hand? And the seller would say, well, yeah, I mean, that would be great. Say, well, the good news is, because I work for Royal LePage Signature, I have a very strong management team and a lot of people in my environment that have a tremendous amount of experience. Now, I'm going to be the point person on the file. I'm going to be looking after all the details. I'm going to be your liaison to our office. By the way, 400 salespeople. So you have an incredibly powerful team at your disposal and a very sophisticated management team to support this file. So you have the best of both worlds. You have my enthusiasm and energy, excited about the career that's in front of me, and you have the experience and the depth of an organization like Royal LePage Signature setting us up. Okay, what's next?
Nice. Well, I get a feeling that he's answering that way because he says he hasn't faced it yet. So
good.
And the last one coming from Keith out in Royal LePage, Prince Rupert, where BB from the Learning Services team was actually just yesterday, so I hope he's watching. And Susan Roberts in Peterborough from Royal LePage. Frank, all you realtors are the same. We've sold homes ourselves. It's not rocket science. How do you go about? How low would you go on your commission if we list with you? And this ties into a question actually we got from Richard Cook, who said, how do you respond to an objection on commission from another agent in your office?
Well, the first thing I would do with the agent in the office is I would take out a piece of paper. I'd say, Mr. Seller, please write your name with this pen on this piece of paper. And he'd write that, and I'd say, can I see the pen for a second? And I would write his name, and I'd say, same piece of paper, yes, yep, same name, yep, same pen, yep, completely different signature, wouldn't you agree? You see, it's not just the company you choose, it's the agent. So at the end of the day, the good news is you've chosen Royal LePage, and now you're going to be able to determine which Royal LePage agent is going to be the perfect one to fit your situation. Now, in terms of so that's called the pen close. That'll help separate out when you're competing against other Royal LePage agents. Now, in terms of it's not rocket science, it is. And I say it is a complex real estate or a complex contract. Selling a house is not simple, and it is a very litigious. In fact, just to quote some U.S. numbers for you, 50% of all the lawsuits that are of any kind in the state of California are real estate specific. So, and anybody who's been in real estate any length of time knows that there are complexities around a real estate transaction. Yes, it is a very complicated transaction. And if you've sold homes in the past and didn't use a real estate agent, I'd be concerned that you may have sold them for a lot less than you should have. I bring to our relationship a very sophisticated value process to make sure that you put the right price. But even more importantly today, the buyer isn't coming from across the street like they did in previous decades. Because of our global reach today, we're able to take your property and expose it to the marketplace around the planet. And in the process, that buyer that because you have a for sale by owner sign on your front lawn, or you've ran an ad in the local newspaper, they may never know your property is available. One of the great things about Royal LePage is we bring buyers from all over the world to your doorstep. We're going to use great photography to make sure that your property is showcased. We're going to use videography so that people can experience the property. We're going to make sure that we are using marketing materials and all of the different digital campaigns globally to bring as many people to your doorstep as possible. At the end of the day, our marketing alone can expose your property to more people, and in the process drive the price up way above what a for sale by owner can. If you're only selling it at a local level, you're only getting a local price, or at least a local experience. When you hire us, you're going to have the exposure that's necessary to create multiples and potentially a bid up situation. So but that, and I could go on and on with that. I know we're at 3:04 right now, and
yeah. And I just noticed a typo on my slide, and that's driving me crazy. Retorts.
Oh, right. Okay.
One question I have from Sandy here. She says, I always thought a net sheet was an integral part of the listing presentation and one of the key things the seller ought to know. If you don't use it regularly, don't your sellers ask how much it's going to cost?
You know what, Sandy? I want to applaud you for that. I would have it, and I would definitely, after the listing was signed, I would bring out my net sheet and walk them through it if I felt that was going, and I think that's important. You know, Sandy, I train all over North America, and I can tell you that it is a small fraction of salespeople that are comfortable using a net sheet. So my compliments to you. That in itself speaks volumes about the quality of the work you're doing, and I can tell you that there are very, very few people that are comfortable with it. So good for you. And yes, it has, after the listing is signed and it's in my briefcase, we've already agreed on price and I like the price, then I'm going to say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I think we should just take this one step further. Let's take a few minutes and let's figure out exactly what we're going to be netting out of this. We'll add that to your down payment that you may have, and then, of course, your GDS and TDS ratios to give us a sense of what price range we're going to be shopping in. So good for you, Sandy. That's top shelf stuff. I like that.
Nice. Now, so that's all the questions we got. We're going to wrap up in a couple minutes. I did want to invite Chris, so to speak, a little bit about Leaders Edge virtual training, so I'll give you a couple seconds just to chat about that as well.
I've come to realize that I can't be everywhere, and I'd like to be. I'd like to be everywhere I could to help you guys with the challenges that you face on a daily basis in the marketplace. So a while back, we created a digitally delivered system wherever there's an internet connection. There's 16 hours of video sales training in here. It's very, very cost effective. Royal LePage Canada has created a great opportunity for you guys. And it's often used as an in-house broker training system for a lot of the offices in the country right now. You can buy it individually as salespeople. It's very, very affordable. And I would recommend that you have this in your library and use it as a go-to. If you're going in on a FSBO appointment, and that came up a number of times today, review the whole FSBO chapter and load up on the dialogues to convince them. If you know you're going up against some other agents, coming up with your comparison chart and the strategies around creating that value proposition that sets you apart. If you're up against a commission, the seller's going to be hard on you on commissions. There's a whole chapter on commissions and dialogues and scripts. You can print them out. You can watch me deliver this stuff, and again, it's very cost effective. And my staff, if you were to call my office or go online, will take you and give you an actual overview of the system. So for a free orientation, call us at 866-607-7999. Melanie most likely will be the person that will help you through this, and it's free to do the orientation to see if it's something you would be interested in. But I know that it would be incredibly valuable to have this in your library, and it's very, very inexpensive.
Yeah, I mean, you can see just the time. Like we're already almost 10 minutes over, and it's like we still have too much information to give.
Yeah.
So let me wrap it up. I just want to invite everybody out to our spring marketing workshop from the Learning Services team, Maximize Your Earning Potential in 2015. Chris, you talked a little bit about listing marketing costs, and really, if you come to our workshop, we're going to show you some of the tools that you have at your disposal to make really fantastic things like listing presentations and marketing pieces, and know how to use the technology that's available to you. So BC, Manitoba, we're already there right now. Alberta and Quebec, we're going to be coming in at the end of April, and we're in Ontario throughout. Of course, I invite you to join us on all of our other webinars. We have some consistent webinars. We do the same each month, our welcome webinar and getting started with the Marketing Center. And then we also offer monthly webinars that deliver new content each and every month. Building Your Tech Toolkit and the Sales Success webinars. This is all found on royallepage.ca/training. And with that in mind, I'd love to invite you to our next Sales Success webinar. We're actually going to be talking about building your business in the luxury market on April 20th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific Time. It's going to be presented by Laurie, who is the founder of the Institute for Luxury Home Marketing. Has been in the residential real estate business for 30 years, sold luxury real estate, managed a large real estate office. I mean, she is definitely the person we want presenting this, and are really looking forward to that. And then after that, the following month, we're going to get back to Chris. So check out royallepage.ca/training, look for Sales Success on the left, and add it to your Google Calendar. And while you are there, I ask you if you could complete the survey that is found under the Sales Success section. One of the things that we ask for in that is topics. And Chris kind of alluded to, hey, maybe a workshop on defending commission would be something you're interested in. And I saw some comments on YouTube of people saying, yeah, I'd love to do that. So we want to hear what you think of these webinars, and we certainly want to hear your input on topics that we can deliver in the future. So thank you everybody for joining in. Thank you so much, Chris, for your time, and thanks everybody for submitting your objections to us so that Chris could give us some real exacts as to what we respond to them. And we'll see you next month.
Thanks, guys.